I'm Lynette. I'm from Monash University, and I'm going to present to you today a collaborative project I did with my PhD students, looking at generative AI and how it is a decolonizing force for academic communication when used well. I'm going to start you today to talk about the way in which generative AI has been perceived in academia more generally for the last several years, and what this has meant for those wanting to use AI and using it in their work. And then how that impacts higher education more broadly, including talking about the current linguistic politics that exist within academia. And then I'll talk to you about our study and what we found in how generative AI can help more marginalized scholars actually be part of academia, and what then the implications of this are for us in the academic workforce. So firstly, who are we? So this study was me as the research supervisor working with 5 of my PhD students, and you can see some nice icons of us on the slides there. We are all multilingual users of English. So we come from Vietnam, China, Afghanistan, Indonesia, and South Africa, and speak multiple languages, at least 2, including Vietnamese, Mandarin, Persian, Pashto, Balinese, Bahasa Indonesia, and Afrikaans. And this means that when we engage in academia, we are in Australia, we are communicating in English and writing our papers or our thesis in English. But this is not, of course, the first language that we have, which means that there are some linguistic implications of that and how we work. So what is important to realize that academia broadly is Anglophonic. It is a space where English is valued over other languages. And the capacity to write and communicate your research in English is much more valued because all those big journals, they are in English. If you write in something that is not English, then it is likely that many people will never actually see your work because they cannot understand your language. This means that if you're coming from another language, you need to learn the hidden rules of how to write academically in English, which are often quite different in style to other languages' styles of writing. And this means that people who have different linguistic communication skills find often that they feel like they don't fit, or when they try and communicate ideas that are maybe not westernized, because English brings with it westernized and colonial ideas. When they try and communicate things in a different way, this does mean that often their research becomes marginalized because those are not things that other people are used to or sometimes even willing to consider. So why did we want to look at generative AI? So, I mean, all of us know that generative AI has been creating all sorts of interesting experiences in higher education. But one of the things that Gen AI is really good at is language, right? So generative AI is the ones that we are using in this particular study are large language models that are good with language. They can help you communicate your ideas in many languages now, but particularly they are very good at English. And so this means that students are using the large language models to help them communicate their ideas in English more effectively. But there are a lot of polarized discourses about Gen AI. And I mean, you just have to go onto social media on any day to see some people say, wow, AI is the best thing ever. And other people saying, no, anyone who uses AI is an evil cheater who should be kicked out of whatever discipline they're in, right? And we're like, well, there has to be a middle ground, right? It can't all be all good or all bad. And so we wanted to showcase that there are actual real capacity in the technology use if it is used effectively. So we decided to consider how we, as multilingual users of English, use and experience the use of AI in how it influences our navigation of academic and social spaces. to do this, we developed a real model of praxis, so that is decolonial in nature. So I come from South Africa, in case you could not notice that from my surname. And so I really wanted to try and consider the concept of generative AI through a more traditional philosophy, in this case, Ubuntu, which is in its most basic definition, I am because we are. So Ubuntu is a traditional African philosophy. It is also very similar to many other indigenous knowledge systems that values relationship over individualization. And a lot of the polarized discourses, particularly the negative discourses, come from the people who are benefiting from the status quo. It is helping them, the way the things are, they have always succeeded better, they are competitively more advantaged. And this means that those other people who are disadvantaged are missing out in the field. And I wanted to, instead of focusing on this very competitive market of academia, I wanted to say, what if we make academia more relational? We're all working together. Our aim as academics should be to further knowledge, right? It should not be, I do better, you do worse. And so because of that, I decided to suggest we use the Ubuntu philosophy, which spoke to several of my students, because as I said, it is one that is also very similar to other traditional indigenous views. We used collaborative autoethnography, where you use personal experience to illuminate cultural discourses. And in this case, it is collaborative because it's each of our experience together. And we used GenAI and how we used it as a space to explore how we used, or maybe didn't use, our agency and negotiated the Anglophonic linguistic norms of academia, as well as sometimes maybe resist some of the norms and the ways of thinking that is out there because of our use of generative AI. So these are some quotes from two participants, Zichi on the left and Zhiheng on the right. And here you can see they're talking about what they found really particularly valuable in using the generative AI in their studies. So for example, Zichi was trying to translate a Chinese idiom that is very profound in their setting into English, but when she literally translated it, it lost its meaning. And the translation tool DeepL didn't really help her to convey the actual meaning, because of course metaphor is not always literally translatable, right? So what she decided to do is, I wonder whether ChatGPT can help me convey the idea of this quote into English, which it did. And apparently it was beautiful in the way that it had translated it for her, because it translated it in terms of a metaphoric stage and explained what it meant. And it helped her to actually convey this quite traditional way of thinking of the participant much more effectively in her study. Zhiheng, on the other side, was using it to try and understand theory. The Bourdieu's theory, those of us who use it know that it is very complex and sometimes can, because it has so many difficult concepts, can be hard to follow. So she was using the tool to help her understand in this particular quote what practice is and how it fits with some of the other concepts. And it helped her to have a foundational understanding and then move on to do some further thinking. These are two more of the students. So Nuri on the left there talked about how he used the tools not just for academic like learning of content, but to help connect with people from different cultures, to help understand them, to help find a way to communicate his way of thinking to them in a way that they would understand. And this helped him to foster cross-cultural exchanges. And then Reddy on the right there has used it to help her with academic writing because of her linguistic background. The way in which she translates things in her head from Bahasa into English sometimes means that the ideas are not so clear and logical because English's sentence structure is so different. But now that she's able to use this tool, she is able to feel more confident that she can convey her ideas with articulation because of the linguistic capacity of ChatGPT in this case. And this is Maxi. Maxi was using AI in all sorts of different ways, such as improving grammar and spelling and vocabulary and these sorts of things, but also in terms of helping him teach and developing lesson plans for his classes that he was teaching. And it feels like, once again, he was using it not just to communicate better, but to develop confidence. And what is really important here is that last part of his quote, where he talks about the fact that it becomes the quality of ideas that is more important than the actual linguistic capacity to write something nice in English. So when we can start to move beyond the you must write in nice, pretty academic English and actually focus on the ideas, we as academics can start to actually critique the ideas more effectively, build more on each other's knowledge. Additionally, while it is not particularly surprising that these students use the tools to, for example, improve their grammar or their sentence structure or things like that, what is important to note is that they are able to take their ideas from their traditional cultures and languages and convey it into English, like Zichi did with that metaphor we talked about before, which means that now in academia, we can start to get those ideas that were always hidden in some other language that we couldn't understand and learn from others and therefore build knowledge even more. So our approach to using the AI, if used well, is challenging the orthodoxy of what is good academic communication, right? Because the way in which we showed that you could use it showed that how GenAI can help amplify not just the English capacity, but the actual authentic voices of these non-English speaking people in academia. Because you can now convey your idea in your traditional way of thinking, your more traditional cultural or religious or philosophical views in a way that others can understand. Additionally, that means that those ideas that they can convey now have more legitimacy because they are conveyed in English that other people can understand. So now we can start to get access to more epistemologies that we may not have known before because it helps to communicate it in English. Now, we do realize that the problem itself is actually that you have to communicate in English. But we also realize that we, as researchers, are not going to change that anytime soon. English is the way of communicating in academia, and until we can have Star Trek level immediate translation for anyone in their own language, that is not going to change. So until that time, we are saying that being able to allow these students space where they can actually convey their ideas in their own ways of thinking, in their own traditional cultures and values, is helping to decolonize academia, because it is helping to bring forth epistemologies and expressions and ideas that were not previously legitimated. And therefore, a broader range of scholars can contribute to academia. Now, GenAI does challenge the traditional dynamics and established hierarchies of academia because more people can do things, right? More people can write in nice, pretty English than used to before. And so people who may have previously found that they were benefiting from this way of Anglophonic communication are now suddenly finding that they're not the only ones who can do this. And this is related to those polarized discourses we talked about before. And this is why some people are pushing against it. The other thing that we also found throughout the narratives of the participants is that it enables people to engage with people who are different to themselves. So you saw Nuri, for example, using it for cross-cultural exchanges. Several people talked about, for example, they're in Australia and people use this really strange way of saying something that they didn't understand. So they get ChatGPT to help them understand the cultural nuance of Australian communication, for example. Or if someone talks about an idea that is maybe not familiar to them, they can go and look it up and have ChatGPT explain it to them. This helps to build more inclusive spaces where everyone's ideas can be valued. Now, what we were able to show that when you weave together the technology of GenAI with the stories of these individual participants and this relational philosophy of Ubuntu, we were able to create a space that was more inclusive and relational and just. And we found that when GenAI then is used well, it can support the agency of us as the scholars, right? But what is using GenAI well? This means knowing how to use GenAI with literacy, understanding the ethical implications of them, openly discussing and acknowledging how you've used it, all those sorts of things. And we also made a theoretical and methodological contribution by creating that praxis model that I talked to you about before. Now, I will highlight to you this quote from me, which is in the paper. When new technologies are introduced, there are always people who push against it. This happened, for example, quite recently when CAS calculators came in for mathematics. There was lots of, yes, we should do it, no, we shouldn't do it, it's cheating and evil, or yes, it's great because it's going to make things better, right? We use CAS calculators now. The example I talked about here is typewriter. Way back in ye olden times, when people were writing academic papers by hand and the typewriter came in, did they have these same arguments? When the typewriter then went on to become a computer, did they have these same arguments? This is a common discourse that happens when new technology comes in, but we need to move beyond it. We need to move beyond saying, well, when I see the word delve or tapestry in someone's works, it's AI generated and bad. Or most recently, I can see on the internet these last few months, if there's an M dash in writing, therefore the writing is bad because it was AI generated. But the M dash, delve, and tapestry are entirely legitimate words or punctuation marks to use in academic writing. So making that argument is devaluing the fact that it's actually the argument that's important, not the words and the punctuation marks. We need to move beyond this into a space where we can all coexist and work on improving knowledge rather than trying to advantage the few who benefit from the academic orthodoxy. So we would like you to remember that in academic space, and I think in the world more generally, innovation and equity can coexist. And if we work together, we can actually help build knowledge rather than break each other down. And this picture that's on the screen there, I created with Leonardo AI. And I asked it to create a picture where it demonstrates nature, something that represents Africa and something that represents technology all working together. And I actually quite like this picture and what it's come up with. It has a lot of interesting things that you can think about it. But if you think about academic space as this space where, when we create a space where the technology is working and coexisting with us and helping us to build and advance knowledge, then we're all growing like these technological trees we have on the screen. These are some things that maybe you can think about. What is good academic writing and who sets those standards? And how do the standards that currently exist in academia privilege some over others? And there are some issues in terms of epistemic justice in terms of the fact that most generative AI tools are trained on predominantly Western ways of thinking. Now, this is being addressed, but it is still certainly predominantly Western focused. So how can we use and teach each other how to use these in a way that does support those more decolonial knowledge practices? And how can we also encourage people to use the tools well and not fall into the trap of getting that AI voice we heard of before, but not lose their cultural specificity or scholarly voice themselves? I've got my contact details on the slide there, and I'm looking forward to some exciting question time.